We'll build a land where we bring good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn. And we'll live in gardens instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, live and create peace, where justice shall flow down like waters, and peace like a ever-flowing stream.
Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm Paula Greenwood. I've been a member of the church for about 12 or 13 years. I've done this before, but it's been a while, so if I skip something or get something out of order, I know you'll quit. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Rappahannock. We welcome any first-time visitors. I hope you will all stay after the service for coffee and conversation. Please silence your cell phones or I'll throw them in the water. Threats always help.
That's really good, Paula. I like that.
Okay, first thing we're going to do is light our chalice. So, do that. Whoops. Oh dear. Well, that worked well.
Try one more.
One more back. The chalice lighting and the opening words will be the same. We'll combine the two things. This is from the Haudenosaunee of New York and Canada, also known as the Iroquois, a nation of 5 tribes that worked in unison. Today we have gathered and we see that the cycles of life continue. We've been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one, as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. Now our minds are one. Then we have a hymn, number 170. We are a gentle, angry people.
We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. We are justice-seeking people, and we are singing for our lives. We are justice-seeking people, and we are singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing for our lives. We are the gay and straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
Great. Okay, first we're going to do the joys and concerns before we sing any young people out. That's where we come up and we talk about the good things that have happened to us in the last week, or the sorrows, or our concerns, or someone who's ill, or going through a bad time. And we we come up and talk into the microphone and drop a piece of sea glass into the water. So does anyone have a joy and concern they'd like to share?
My daughter wrote me this week and said, I think today's your anniversary, Dad. It was the 6th. And I wrote her back and I said, no, we got married on the 8th of June, 68. So it's 6/8/68. And I can never remember that date. I mean, never forget that date. However, the date I got tattooed on my brain, but the date on the calendar I frequently forget. So yesterday morning when my wife walked in and gave me the card, I went, oh, today's the 8th. 56 years we've been married and 61 years we've been alive. I'm going to let this down on it.
I'm going to put a piece of sea glass. Anyone else?
On my way over here, I was listening to the radio, and they were discussing, I don't like to bring it up, but I will, because it made my insides turn. They were discussing what might happen if a certain person gets elected this year. And it's terrible stuff, and I think terrible stuff. But it's something we all should be aware of, I think. So I'm the bad guy bringing it up. However, I also am feeling a little better about certain things. I have had to go to the ER over the weekend because I had terrible pain right where they want to where they want to operate, and that has pushed things along a little faster. So I hope that everything will be over swiftly.
Anyone else?
Good morning. I have a joy I celebrate every year since 2006, and that was that on June 6, 2006, sorry, this is actually really good news. Buddy Spencer went flying out of a tree at a significant height and ultimately got helivac to UVA Neurological Center in the ER and was in ICU. And he lived to tell about it. And I'm just really grateful he's still here because he almost wasn't.
Anyone else? Okay, my turn. Some of you know 92-year-old Lois Williams and I are buds. We both take a deep interest in local history. And a few weeks ago, she fell down some steps and broke her hip and got sent to Mechanicsville and got a hip operation, and then she's back at RWC. However, she is in a room, mostly in bed it seems, although she ought to be up walking around, and she doesn't get email, she has trouble reading cards, but if any of you have 20 minutes, she would love to have a visitor. Her room is 172 in the care unit in RWC. If you walk in the front door, they can direct you. And she has, oddly enough, Judy Caples, a UU, as a roommate, but she would love to have visitors because she can't really read or do a whole lot else. So I visited her yesterday and she was very happy to see me. All right, Tom has a reading now. This is Tom Coye. He's going to be our speaker today. I'll talk more about him in a few minutes. The Reverend Tom Coye, a Presbyterian minister, been an active community participant for many years, and he has a reading about what his subject is today.
Actually, you've just given the introduction to, really, you don't need to say any more about introduction. My talk is going to be about 30 minutes. I've timed it. I know it's a little longer perhaps than what you're used to, but I want to save time on front of it if we can. So I'm introduced, okay?
Okay.
Okay, we're good.
All right.
My talk today is going to focus on a person named Bryan Stevenson. If you do not know who he is at this moment, I pray my talk will help you understand who he is by the time we're done. But he is deeply involved in the racial justice, especially as it's being acted out and portrayed in Montgomery, Alabama. And so we have a quote from him from a podcast we're going to hear in just a few minutes, a part of our podcast. So it is, we're all burdened by our history of racial inequality. It's created a kind of smog that we all breathe in, and it has prevented us from being healthy. He does a remarkable metaphor here of saying racial injustice is like a disease. We know we can treat diseases.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, next. We have a silent reflection on the reading. So everybody get your thoughts together and get rid of them. Now we will take an offering. We appreciate anything that you can give us to help along our programs. And we will put your money to good use. And any first-time visitors, go ahead and let the basket pass you by. And thank you.
Recognizing the independence of all life, we strive to build community. The strength we gather will be our salvation. If you are black and I am white, it will not matter. If you are female and I am male, it will not matter. If you are older and I am younger, it will not matter. If you are straight and I am gay, it will not matter. If you are progressive and I am conservative, it will not matter. If you are a Christian and I am Jewish, it will not matter. If we join spirits as brothers and sisters, the pain of our aloneness will be lessened, and that doesn't matter. In the spirit, we build community and move towards restoration.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, well, he needs no introduction, so a strange man will come up and now talk to you.
Well, good morning again.
Good morning.
It's a real joy to be here today with you all once again. I've been here a couple of times now over the years, and I always feel like I can talk about things here that I really can't talk about in other places. And it's really wonderful. Plus, you entertain a certain deeper level of communication and content than what normal preaching can do. And I appreciate that very much. Being kind of a teacher type myself, I really appreciate the opportunity to share some things on a deeper level than I could otherwise do. I'm here today to first say thanks to Diana Jameson. Diana's here. There she is. Diana has been a part with me over the years in our Pledge to End Racism program. We just completed a cycle here at the UU Church. Thank you for not only providing us with the Pledge to End Racism, but also offering your facilities for us to have the community programs here. We had about 25 people enrolled in it. We went for 6 sessions, and it was a very good experience. The understanding of racial justice has always been an issue for me, but it really got deeper when George Floyd was murdered. That moved my needle over into the red zone, and that's when I became more deeply involved in the whole subject. I've been part of the interracial conversations group of the Northern Neck for several years. I'm on the steering committee with that. And since that time, that program and plus the Pledge to End Racism has come along, has helped me to get more deeply involved in the ability to talk about racial justice and its implications, and most miraculously to do it in a way that doesn't suddenly get everybody all on their side of the issue and not listening. There are ways to talk about this very complex issue that invites conversation, not prevents it. And that's the spirit I come today to share. It's in that kind of spirit, to talk about something that's complicated, deep, and as Bryan Stevenson indicated in his quote, it is a disease. If we look at it as a disease, that means we can do something about it. It may be serious, but it doesn't have to be terminal. There is a cure. So, I do this by way of our trip to Montgomery, so I've got a bit of a slideshow here. I'm going to plow through them because time is limited. And at one point, I do want to have a segment, an audio segment of a podcast with Bryan Stevenson, so you can get to hear what he sounds like and get a feeling for his mind and for his spirit, because he really is the dominating person in Montgomery now in terms of this whole racial justice initiative that's going on. But we heard about this, yes, first off, kudos to Judy Thompson. I don't know if you know Judy. She lives, if I had a really good arm, I could throw a softball at your house. Literally, she's down on Newtown Road.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And she was my associate pastor at St. Andrews for a number of years. But she's the one who on our interracial conversations group seized the idea about a bus trip to Montgomery. We've been meeting for a couple of years, several years. We've never done anything together. Well, this was it. She found the funding, $25,000 to help out. She found the hotel. She made the reservations. She found the bus company. She found the tour guide. She did it all. Judy made it happen. And you were part of us. Bless your heart. And no one else here was on that trip, were they? Okay, but you were. So correct me when I make errors, okay?
I'm sure you won't.
I have to give a nod to Judy. She really did a wonderful job. There's our bus. We came out with the Olita Bus Company, a black-owned business down in Williamsburg. Brand new bus. Wonderful. State of the art. And if you remember Greyhound from your early days, it's better. That's us crossing into Georgia. The group is about 47 in size, slightly more black than white. Our youngest was the young man, if you go to the left of the banner at the corner, he's about 12 years old. And you can see there's an age range in there, ranging from middle age to my kind of people. Wow. Our hotel was on this particular street, and as you walk out, turn left, the thing next door is the Hank Williams Museum. And there's a tribute to Hank. That town loves Hank. And if you're black or you're white, you love Hank. There's a waterfront. Very nice. They have a little scenic tour boat. But this is working waterfront over the years. The Alabama River goes way up into Alabama. It was a major port. That's why Montgomery is where it is. And cargo, livestock, crops, and just slaves came in on this river, disembarked, and were sent to market from there. Also, it's an export for the area's production as well. Turning around from the waterfront, you can see how they've developed now into community space where all kinds of things can take place. And note the railroad. That's another part of what makes Montgomery the commercial center. It was always a railroad stop, conveniently located. Commercial town. This is a building downtown on the second floor. It's when they sent the telegraph message from the Confederate States of America Secretary of War to P.G.T. Beauregard to commence firing upon Fort Sumter in 1861. Montgomery was the original capital of the Confederacy. Now, we all know Richmond was the ultimate capital, but for about 5 months, Montgomery was the capital, and that's where the order came to commence firing. It's also had slave markets, and they had like 4 depots in town where slaves were auctioned, and this fountain is the one that was closest to us. It's on Dexter Avenue, and there was an auction house there. Along with slaves, they auctioned off livestock, crops, all commodities. Slaves were commodity. They were not human, they were commodities. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Up there is the capital of the state of Alabama. Wow. A little closer up. It was from those steps that George Wallace in 1963, in his inaugural address as governor, said, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. That's where we were in 1963. He changed. And there's another point of view you see in town. This is a mural quoting Maya Angelou. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived. But if faced with courage, need not be lived again. As another view of history. And that's the one that really dominates the spirit of Bryan Stevenson. This is the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church where Martin Luther King was pastor. And this was during the Montgomery bus boycott around the 1957-58. And there's Tom and Linda standing with Rosa. This is where she got on the bus. That stop right there, where she refused to give up her seat because a white man had come on board. And that's what started, that's what really launched the bus boycott. So now we're invited today to stand with Rosa. And this is another center there. This is not part of Bryan Stevenson's work, but this is the Southern Poverty Law Center. Has a civil rights memorial. And this is a sculpture that has water that flows from the center down the north side and back down. And then it has all around it the story of the civil rights movement, starting with Brown versus the Board of Education, and it goes around to around the mid-1970s. But their message, of course, is civil rights goes on. All right, so I told you we step out of the hotel, turn right. The first thing you come to is the Hank Williams Museum. Cool. The next door you come to is this, the Equal Justice Initiative. This is the center of Bryan Stevenson's work and operation. Bryan Stevenson, as you can see him pictured there, is an attorney. He's about 65 years old right now. He grew up in Delaware during the time of segregation and the ending of segregation. So he went through all of that integration piece that many of us are familiar with from the 1960s. He educated at Harvard and began his career as an attorney in Montgomery, on a project to work with persons on death row who quite possibly were there because of bad lawyering, bad court decisions. And that was the project that got him launched. And if you've ever seen the movie Just Mercy, I see some nods. If you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix. I checked it out last night, I watched it again. It's an excellent documentary. And it's not meant to be a documentary, it's more of a drama film, but it's a wonderful documentary about his work and the first case he worked with to overturn a death sentence, and it worked. It was the McMillan case. His organization has been successful in about 140, 150 cases so far now over the years of reversing death row sentences. He learned a lot of lessons as he went through that particular first time around. And you can see in the movie how he was absorbing ideas and thoughts about the whole complex issue, not just the legal issue of people on death row, but the whole system of racial injustice and how it's embedded in our culture and has been for 400 years. It's a special case that we need to pay attention to. And that's what has inspired him to do his museum and his memorial. I have a podcast clip that I'd like to play for you, about 5 minutes, and we're going to start at the point where he's talking about lynchings as they were conducted throughout the Jim Crow era. And it'll go for about 5 minutes. But he moves on to other things. It's not just the lynchings, but it's a lot of his reflections. And what I want you to hear is the spirit in which he speaks, the attitude he brings to a very serious problem, and the hopefulness in his voice. Listen to that.
The people who perpetrated these racial terror lynchings weren't the Ku Klux Klan. They didn't cover their faces. This wasn't done in the middle of the night. They could have buried the bodies underground to mask this violence, but instead they did the opposite. They lifted these bodies up. They invited the whole community to come and participate. They sometimes served lemonade and deviled eggs as refreshments while this torture was taking place. And they acculturated communities into accepting this kind of brutality against Black people. And the legacy of that, I think, is quite tragic. So accountability for me is at the heart of what we're trying to do. We can't go on. We cannot pretend that something really destructive, something really corruptive happened when communities came to celebrate this kind of violence. So we have to talk about it. We have to acknowledge the wrongfulness of it. I think we would benefit as a society if we expressed our shame about it, and everybody was complicit. Not just the people who literally showed up and hanged the person or shot the person or drowned the person. It was all the elected officials who stood out of the way. It was the federal government who did not intervene despite hundreds and hundreds of requests that there be some kind of intervention. It was law enforcement. And the tragedy of that terror, which is still felt in communities today, older people of color come up to me sometimes and they say, Mr. Stevenson, I get angry when I hear somebody on TV talking about how we're dealing with domestic terrorism for the first time in our nation's history after 9/11. They said we grew up with terror. We had to worry about being bombed and lynched and menaced every day of our lives, and it actually provokes them that our nation is capable of fighting a war on terror, sending troops and spending billions to confront the threat posed by terror when our nation did nothing, while millions of people, African American people, were being terrorized and traumatized by this violence, where they were sending away their loved ones because they couldn't feel safe and secure. And so accountability is at the heart of this. How do we recover from something so brutal, so tragic, so devastating as the legacy, as the evidence of brutal violence that is presented by these lynchings?
He goes on in his next thoughts there to compare the silence around talking about this racial abuse in our past with the parallels of the how we are supposed to keep silent about domestic abuse or child abuse, things like that. We've discovered that when people can finally find a safe place to talk about these issues in their past, healing begins to happen. He says we need to create the same kind of safe space so that there can be this talk about the hurts that we carry in us regarding the racial injustices in our culture. So, he has two major projects and a third in the works, but the two major ones he has right now that are creating those safe spaces is called the Legacy Museum for $10. You have unlimited access to the museum over any period of time. We all went there for the first day, and we walked around for 2 or 3 hours and certainly got overwhelmed by the amount of information in there. It's a narrative museum. It talks about the story of America's relationship to the Black person in particular. Some other groups are brought in peripherally, but mostly it's the story of America's relationship with the African American, starting with, of course, slavery, going up through Reconstruction, and then Jim Crow, the lynchings, to civil rights, and then now into what's the most hidden but massive amount of discrimination, which is mass incarceration. You can't take pictures inside, so I had to scoop these off the internet. One, the upper left, is typical of the example you see of what you see for information. It's really a multimedia experience with visual, audio, print media, interactive kinds of displays. There's a lot of variety in this museum. And in fact, my wife went back 2 more times after we left that museum that day because she wanted to get more information. Up on the left is a wall which goes up about 12, 14 foot, and it's just plastered with reproductions of symbols of segregation. So whites only all over the place, colored here. There's some newspaper ads and things like that that are all related to that particular aspect of history of racism in our country. The lower right is an interactive display which is talking about the mass incarceration problem now. And what you have are holograms, and you sit down on the bench. It's just like in the prisons, and I've done this. I visited people in prison, and you do sit there at a bench with a telephone, and you talk to them through the glass. As soon as you pick up the phone, the hologram pick up the phone and starts talking about his particular reason for being there, and they tell stories about the mass incarceration these days. This was one of the most poignant aspects and memorable aspects in that museum. Those are jars of soil of counties, about 320, I believe is the count, of counties in America where a documented lynching took place. And so what you have then is this wall, and you go on the other side, it's more of the same on the other side. These different colored soils, all varieties, but they're all American soil. But you begin to see by the size of this how big this problem was. That's the thing, we tend not to see the big picture, but Bryan Stevenson's museum helps us to get a feeling for the big picture. And the soil image is quite interesting. He says the soil is used because in the soil of each of those counties is the blood and the sweat of African Americans. But also, soil is what generates new life. So even in the symbol of a soil where something bad happened, there is the potential to see growth coming from it and new beginnings. This is the hope he brings in to the discussion. Outside the museum is a sculpture park. This was literally unveiled when we were there. We came to the museum today, and Rosa was all wrapped up in plastic because she just arrived. And when we came back the next day, it was unwrapped and the memorial was getting pretty well finished up. It's a fascinating sculpture. I mean, you know, a very nice likeness of her, and she's obviously sitting on the bus. But it's a cantilever. What's holding her up? You know, it makes you say, whoa, this is weird. But what it forces you to think is, here she hovers, defying gravity, just as she defied the gravity of a system that said, you must sit in the back. Stuff like this all over Montgomery now. I mean, there's a lot of statuary going on. The other major location that he developed is called the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, and it's really meant to be a shrine. And you're told that as you go in. This is not a park. Don't bring a picnic in. This was meant to be a place of respect for those who have suffered and died because of unfair justice in our country. And it's filled with a number of statues and exhibits, but here's the main exhibit. You go up, and it's a large building, and you start, and you have these blocks of metal, and each block represents a county where lynchings took place. And there's somewhere around 2,000 to 2,500 counties where lynchings took place in our country. And you start at eye level, and you can see the county name and then the names of the people in that county who were lynched. As you go through the exhibit, a change happens. Now, those markers stay the same size, but what happens is your floor goes down. You go down a ramp. As you go down the ramp and down the ramp, you start going below, 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 until you come down to the lowest level, and now you're walking under. And of course, that suggests standing under the lynching tree. And our northern neck representative is Northumberland County. There was a documented lynching there, William Page, in 1917. So he is memorialized here forever. Now, there are other pieces of sculpture and information in that 6-acre property. This one I really liked because this is a memorial to the people who chose the bus boycott and walked to work for over a year, year and a half. And these are working women who are on their way to work. And you can see that they're tired, but they're still walking. And here we go, here's the spirit again. You can see the footprints down there. That's where we're encouraged to stand and have our pictures taken with them. It's an invitation. Join us. Join the struggle. This is not finger pointing. This is an open embrace. Now, there's a lot more that we saw and did, but I got to move on quickly. The one thing I want to note before we sign off is that, and this was not part of our intentional tour, but as I looked around, I kept saying, you know, this town is looking pretty good. 20 years ago, it was a desolate, dead downtown. I mean, boarded up, nobody lived there. You had the state capitol, that was about it. Now it's flourishing. Because of what Bryan Stevenson is doing, people are coming to Montgomery to learn, to listen, and yes, to spend some dollars. There has been a lot of renovation. A lot of the old buildings have been bought up. They're being converted into restaurants downstairs and apartments upstairs. This is an alleyway of warehouses that have been renovated. What you have, of course, on the right are the addition of these New Orleans style front porches. And there are restaurants there. You go down, turn right, and there's more restaurants. And the whole downtown is becoming more and more an interesting place to be and to walk around and to enjoy. This is on Dexter Avenue. In fact, the Capitol is right up there. This is where we spent our last evening having supper. You see the chairs up top. That's where we had our supper. And there's Jim Mosley. Oh my gosh, he lives. Phil Mumford, you might know Phil, with the Boys and Girls Club, myself, and Linda took the picture. And so we came home, and by no means the end. And that is my talk. So thank you for listening.
Just a minute, people. My hands are all sweaty. Does anybody have comments or questions for Tom? Okay.
Thank you, Tom. That was wonderful.
Yeah.
And that movie was absolutely wrenching too, the Just Mercy.
The Just Mercy, yeah.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
wrenching. I have a comment, and that is about some of
Sure.
Bryan Stevenson's ideas as expressed in the podcast. It's sort of interesting how people both get desensitized to prejudice, and they also can relearn to be more empathic. And so I'm a long retired physician, but when I was in mid-career, someone did a study on medical students and the loss of empathy they had in their original years. So the things that we did, like dissecting human bodies and having to do things on lab animals, etc., and some of our experiences of being overtired, and the camaraderie that came through that was prejudicial. And so you had my wheels turning about
Interesting.
the idea
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
people who had been exposed to those lynchings in the celebratory way, the awful things they saw and how troubling, but what happens when you're with people that you trust and they are celebrating things that are wrong. And we have that very same process going on today with some white supremacists and some other people who really strongly believe in their own prejudice. My brother, who is executive director of a missionary, that's not a missionary society, it's Sudan Sunrise, and he was for a while doing outreach of southern Sudanese Christians and Muslims to one another. But there is huge racial prejudice in Sudan and South Sudan, and he sent me a tape yesterday of people in South Sudan talking about black people. James called them slaves and said their life is not worthwhile, and describing how the people around them shot people, just saying, this person is worth nothing. This is a slave, they're worth nothing. They're all slaves, they're worth nothing, which is really disturbing to listen to. But thank you so much for the hopeful ending of that, and thanks to Bryan Stevenson for the wonderful work that he has done and continues to do.
Yeah, I think one of the beautiful things that Stevenson does, and it's quite intentional, because we do get desensitized, and we do get politicized, and we do get like, I can't deal with this, blocking it up. What he does in all of his work is to humanize it. He makes it a very understandable human experience. The good, the bad, the ugly, it's all there. And it makes you want to say, it made me want to say, hey, I'm back. I'm in with both feet now, because it really is about people.
We are 107 years from the last lynching in this immediate area. Actually, it happened about 20 miles north of here. We have an activity within the church that's called Food and Philosophy, where we get together once a month, a group of people who have an interest, and explore some various things. We did that, one of those programs last fall. We suggested, if we chose to move from this area, this immediate wherever we are right now, to something fairly nearby, a village that did not suffer from as much racism as we have here today, what would we look for? Would we visit those villages, or that village, that area, and to judge and I emphasize the word judge, whether this would be an area where we would prefer to live versus here. And we ended up with 10 items, 10 things that we would look for. And it helps us think what we could possibly do to improve or to move our community to those 10 characteristics. And let's hope we make some progress in the near future in that direction.
That was a wonderful review of Montgomery, but
Thank you, Joyce.
we also went to Selma.
Yes, we did.
And that was the thing that motivated me to go, because I have wanted to walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge ever since the first time it was done. And I wasn't there. I was I think a young mother at the time, but that was really special. And one of the more, to compare what we experienced with what was experienced with the other two marches was remarkable. There was a musician at the end
Yes.
who was playing, the steel drum, anyway, it was wonderful. And I encourage everyone to make a trip to Montgomery and to Selma and to read Just Mercy or watch the thing. It's all wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce.
Joyce is reminding me so much I left out my talk.
Anyone else have a comment? Ron?
Hi, and thank you for this.
You're welcome.
Growing up in the 60s and the 50s, I remember hearing about these cities that in the South where these awful things were happening. And once as an adult, I went to Birmingham, Alabama. And all I could think about when I was going down there was, hey, awful things happen here, awful things. And so I think other people have heard this story too. I went to get a haircut in a barber shop there in Birmingham. I needed it badly. And I sat down and the barber stood behind me and said, "Whose side are you on?" And I was shocked. I mean, I was like, what am I going to say? This guy behind me with sharp instruments. And I so was relieved when I realized he was talking about football. Huge in Birmingham.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind people that we have 2 copies of Just Mercy in our library in the Coye, and also several other anti-racism books.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Tom. That was wonderful. You did a great job with your PowerPoint presentation too. I want to compliment you on that.
Thank you.
It's the end of our discussion, so I wanted to do a little service announcement. After coffee hour, I will be doing a presentation on de-escalation. And while this is for the security team, I just wanted to let everybody know if they want to hang out and watch it, you're certainly invited. Sure.
I have a comment. In case you don't think that you could be a part of tacit support of cruelty, mental cruelty, physical cruelty, everyday cruelty to people, remember that Hitler studied the history of the United States before he did his extermination programs. And not only did he kill 6 million Jews, he killed homosexuals, he killed the mentally disabled, he killed people of color, pretty much anybody who didn't like what he was doing. was sent to the gas chambers. So please remember that people are watching us, people are studying us besides ourselves, and what goes on in other countries may have very well been picked up here.
The Social Justice Committee is presenting the film Iron Jawed Angels, which is mostly about the suffragettes. It's in the early 1900s. It's 6 o'clock here in, or somewhere in this building. And if you are not interested in suffragettes, but you're interested in black rights, white rights, prison reform, any of this, please come. It's a critically acclaimed movie. It's dramatized, but it's largely true, and at least in spirit.
Okay, if anyone else has any more comments or questions, please see Tom at coffee. Thank you, Tom, very much. That was a wonderful talk, and I'm sure it generated a lot of thought. I think we have another hymn now.
We'll build the land where we bind up the broken. We'll build the land where the captives go free. Where all of gladness dissolves from mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, make and create peace. Where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll live in gardens instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, live and create peace. Where justice shall flow down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
This is from Elizabeth Sell Jones with a slight alteration of the last few words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, warmth of community, or fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts always. And I have a brief closing, which I think goes with Tom's talk really well. This is from Jonathan Sachs, the rabbi. True freedom requires the rule of law and justice and a judicial system in which the rights of some are not secured by the denial of rights to others. And namaste. Namaste.